So I'm going to give you a quick overview of some of the lives, and then there's one that's waiting to come forward. So first of all, there's a woman with a cutlass sword, like a pirate sword, and she's wearing a long dress, but she's showing it split because she says, "How can you climb up the ropes, the rigging?" She's saying in a dress. So she was she said, first I was a pirate's daughter, then I was a pirate's wife. And I said, your father was a pirate? And she said, well, he stole me when I was young because he wanted a daughter. And I said, well, why would he steal you when you were young because he wanted a daughter? And she said, well, he had already stolen 6 boys because he wanted his legacy to continue, and he didn't want to go through the whole process of having a child, so he would just steal children. And he said it's easy enough when you steal a ship and you're killing everyone on the ship. If there's a kid, just steal the kid. And then he saw me, which is you, and he's like, at last, a girl. So you were, from the time you were 6 years old, you were raised to be a pirate. Um, she said your birth name was Letitia, but your pirate name was Betty, and everyone called you Bets, Bets, and Pirate Bets. And you liked Bets because no one can tell if that was a male name or a female name. And, of course, you're growing up in this world that's male dominated. Um, and you had been on well, it was a Spanish galleon, she says, but you were going from Italy to Spain. But she said roundabout because your father had a position and the whole family was moving. So you came from like a wealthy family. And she said, remember that it's going to be relevant later. When the pirate ship took it over, and I'm asking, what origin was your father? Okay, hold on, it's sort of jumbling in. She's like so excited to be talking that it's jumbling in. She said he was of callow complexion because he always had a touch of like scurvy, so he was a white man, but a little bit like jaundiced, and he didn't know what caused it. This was like before, she's like, before the days of Captain Cook, before the days of people understanding about nutrition. So he spent plenty of his life eating like moldy bread or what he called maggot stew, which would be like oatmeal that was maggot infested, but you just boil it and it's like, oh, it's good for you. Um, your adopted father was hardcore. So he always looked a little like yellowish to his skin. Over the years, like teeth would fall out, and uh, he had black hair. And I'm asking, he was of Scottish origin, but um, but his accent was more Scottish English. What she's saying is when he was young, he was arrested for no good reason by the British bastards, and then like sold as indentured servant to a British shipyard owner guy, doing hard labor, and he's a little feisty. So he rallied up some of the guys and they just like killed a bunch of people, grabbed a ship and took off and became pirates. So when you came into his life, it was some 20 years later. He was a successful pirate, and he stayed well clear of the northern climates of Britain and any of that. He said, if I'm going to be on a ship, I'm going to be on a ship where it's warm. And so the Mediterranean and northern Africa, and there were some islands, and um, he said it was always a good idea if there were people trying to kill you to go elsewhere. He said that's one of the benefits of having a big, fast, beautiful ship. He's calling it a boat, big, fast, beautiful boat. Um, so this guy's like a real character, great, broad sense of humor. You never knew what would make him laugh or what would make him shoot someone. Like, yeah, but he loved his children. He was a hard taskmaster upon all of you, but he doted upon you, and you were his legacy. Um, and as children grew, as you children all grew older, and you were the youngest, he's like, now I got me a girl. I'm just kill all the other children we find. Who cares? It's not that he cared about children. He just wanted his legacy. And he said, what was it? 8 stout sons and a daughter. And that was it. That's all he needed. He's like, no one needs more than 9 children. So the oldest son was like 16, and the youngest one was actually younger than you because he was younger than you when he was stolen. He was like a 3 when he was stolen, and you were stolen like a year later when you were 6. So um, he raised you all to become pirate kings and queens, and he taught you all the hard lessons. There were times when he whipped you on your back, like you learned because he's like, you're my legacy. He said, I did not gain this ship by being easy or simple. And the day will come when you have your ships, and then we have a fleet, a galleon, a fleet. He's like, he's using old nautical terms. I think this is like, yeah, I'm asking, it's like mid to late 1600s. Yeah. Uh, so you basically grew up this like you never had regrets about being stolen. So anyway, I just want to fast forward through all the pirate years because she says the relevant moment in her story that she wants to tell you is when everything changed. So when you were 16, 17 years old, you were assisting 2 of your older brothers. One of your older brothers was like when your dad invaded a ship, instead of like burning it at sea, they took it and they killed a bunch of the crew. Whoever would not, your father said, who will be loyal to me? And the smart ones are like, I will. And the dumb ones, no, friends forever. It's like boom, boom, boom. Um, so your older brother was given the ship, and some of the crew of your ship went on that one, and some of the crew of that ship went under your dad's tutelage, on your dad's ship for proper training. And your dad sent your oldest brother, your third oldest brother, you, and the baby, who was the one who is the only one younger. No, there were 2 younger than you, but the one who was a baby. Um, and he spent his whole life hating being called the baby. But he knew the reason they always called him that so as he would never be spoiled, and he ended up being the most ferocious of all of you. Like the song "A Man Named Sue" or whatever. Same kind of psychology. um, so you were on that ship, and um, I'm asking because you weren't grounded. You were in a cove on an island, kind of a tropical island, and you're doing like repairs and maintenance and getting fresh water from a spring and stuff like that. Um, and when you and your baby brother were out exploring, looking to do some hunting. Like you weren't the only ones, other people were hunting and gathering and stuff. When you were kidnapped by, they're showing British soldiers, and your baby brother escaped with just a bullet wound, some pellets launched in his arm, but not a life-threatening situation. But you were kidnapped and taken in, and you were like ferocious with your fighting back, and you're like, you know, but there were too many of them, and they overwhelmed you, and you were taken to the magistrate, um, and he, so this is northwest Africa, but across the top, just going into the Mediterranean. Um, and and so you were taking the magistrate where you were actually treated well. And you were a smart gal. So you're like, well, I can fight them and hang in the gallows, which or be imprisoned for who knows how long, or I can be smart. So they took you in, and you were dressed in uh, you weren't dressed in like pirates or rags. You were wearing nice clothing. Again, split skirt, but you're like, I'm the Pirate King's daughter. I'm not going to dress in rags ever. And you, for your whole life, you kept a locket that you wore around your neck that your mother had given to you, that you were wearing around your neck um, when you were kidnapped. And this was what saved your life because they opened the locket and recognized your parents. And they were like, "How did you come by this?" And he said, "These are my parents. Don't, give it back to me." And um, and suddenly everyone treated you totally different. It was almost like Tarzan returning to his native land. It was like everyone treated you different, and they were like, "This is a miracle," no one ever thought you had survived. And so, fast forwarding a bit, you were returned to your family estate in Italy, and it was like a big estate, title, everything. And your oldest brother by birth was like lord of this big estate. Um, since your parents had died with you, and I'm asking why he wasn't on the ship with you, and they said no. When you all were traveling, he was running the estate. He's much older than you. And they're saying he's your half brother, that your father had married several times with women dying in childbirth and all that. So so anyway, so you were stolen when you were 6. You're now 17. Your brother, who's running the estate, is nearly 40. Okay, so that shows like your dad married a few times and had like children spread out. You were brought into this life you couldn't even comprehend. You had good basic manners because your father, since he was your pirate father, since he had been born like of just like farming people. Um, Whenever you guys stole ships, like he would steal governesses and tutors for you kids. He wanted you all to grow up being able to rule the world. So you actually had basic manners and abilities that were far more than anyone there. And keep in mind, like as Betts is saying, days on the ocean, days on the ocean. There's plenty of time to like learn anything that anyone wants to teach you. Or you can be like, oh, look, another dolphin. Wait 20 minutes. Oh, look, another dolphin. You know? So, so you actually like your birth family was pleasantly surprised to see that you knew latest dances, you knew how to use the fan language, like like ladies in those days had a whole sign language with fans. You knew table manners, you knew how to play instruments. You actually spoke multiple languages and you could read and write in multiple languages. I mean, again, you guys would steal books and like you were very well educated. They were shocked. And at that point, like she said, here's something you can relate to. She became very quiet and conservative and watched how everyone else behaved and learned to mimic that. So that's when there was basically her double personality, where there's the girl, the pirate behavior side, and there's the lady behavior side. And there was like, she said for survival, there was no in between. So sometimes when she couldn't stand the constraints of the genteel life anymore, she'd be in the stables throwing dice and cursing like a pirate with like the farm hands. And then like um, some servant from the house would go into the barn saying, has anyone seen Lady Leticia? And you'd be like hiding like, But if the farmhands ever saw you, like if they were bringing a horse to you when you're about going riding, if they spoke to you, you're like, how impertinent! If you speak such to me again, I will have you whipped. Like you were, so like if you knew in order to keep your sanity, you couldn't always be this. And your brother is like, this is excellent because she's marriage material. I can make a great, situation here. He started like basically brokering you out. You all went to a season in Florence, they're saying, where there are all these balls and, for your coming out season. You were the perfect age, the perfect age. You were almost to 18. You turned to 18 during your season. And you were just like constantly being dressed and like, you know, um, yeah, you're like the hours they spent putting curls in your hair with this like metal rod that they'd heat up and you're like, oh. But you said at the same time, you learned that you could like hold court in your chambers and have servants, like have multiple servants with girlfriends that you met, the more intelligent girlfriends, and your family was like crazy wealthy. So when you would invite girls to come to your place for the day before a ball, and she said the day starts at like 4 in the afternoon, because we're all sleeping in the morning. It's like a huge social thing for them. That way you connected with families that were more legitimate so that people overlooked the fact that you were a pirate girl. And you got to have intelligent, witty conversation. And you said you honestly didn't care if they were like nice girls or wicked mean or what, so long as they didn't like make you die with stupidity. And they would bring their servants, and you would all like lounge around all afternoon eating sugared fruits, and servants would be cracking nuts and putting the meat on a little silver chalice to hand to you to like more, more. You're like so spoiled. You loved it, and sipping cocoa. She said, that was like a really big deal. Um, and drinking lots of wine. But she said wine for ladies back then was less potent than wine is now. It was more, and it tasted sweeter. She said it's more like a Manischewitz wine watered down, or like a hard cider kind of thing, but um, it would not be as potent because she said ladies are not supposed to get tipsy, but the water was pretty much undrinkable in the city. Um, so you all would lounge around and like amuse yourselves however, and you would hire local like performers to come and do little shows for you and then go away while you're like having your hair done or whatever. It's like you're like, this is so opposite to like the lifestyle you had been raised with, but you were an opportunist. Your father raised you to be an opportunist, and you did manage to get letters to your family by because again you had representatives in every port that you would meet with, so you're able to send letters to someone who then sent it to your family. So your father was like very proud of you and would let you know anytime you want to come back they're happy to do a raiding party. And you're like, well, yeah, this is actually pretty good. um, and he said, let me give it a few years and I'll let you know. Um, anyway, so your brother is meanwhile like basically parading you around, your brother and his wife chaperoning you to see like who's the highest bidder for this bit of flesh. And like you didn't appreciate this, but at the same time you said to him, I survived on my own for 11 years. If you try to marry me to anyone that is not of my choosing, you will never see me again. And he says, I'll lock you in your chambers. And you're like, really? You think that could hold me? And you said to him, you looked him in the eyes and said, please, please do not force me to murder your servants so that I can have my freedom. And he looked at you and he's like, okay. Now, they never really wanted to know your history of the missing time, but you know, they knew you were found on a pirate ship. So, because he was worried, like you actually were not a virgin because your father didn't value it, but you had never been like raped or anything. No one would dare. I mean, if they tried you, like literally, it would pull out your dagger and gut them. So yeah, yeah. So does sound like you. So anyway, so your brother and your sister-in-law paraded you around, and eventually it was down to a few choices that they found appropriate, and they're like, okay, you can make the final choice between these are the top five, but these are the top three that we prefer you pick one of them. And you picked one that you're like, you know what, he's pretty clever, he's good looking enough. It was really important to you that the man be bigger and stronger than you because the last thing you wanted was someone where you were the dominant person. He said he's kind of a self-absorbed jerk, definitely a spoiled person, but at the same time, you saw him, he like had a lot of skills and abilities. So you're like, I think this one will do. All the others will like bore me within a week. So you were married off in this huge wedding before the season ended. Huge wedding, and you wore this lace. She's calling a lace shawl, like a veil. It didn't cover your face. She doesn't understand that idea of that. But this lace that trailed down for 27 feet behind you. Yeah, it required 17 children to carry the lace, one at the end, and 8 on either side to carry the lace so it didn't like pull your head back from the weight. And it was a spectacular cathedral wedding. And you're marrying this guy who you were his top choice too. Like both of you had to get married. He was 19. Both of you had to get married. Neither of you wanted to get married. And you're like, yeah, this one will do. And of course, the two families, it was a good fit. So she said on the wedding night, um, you had the wedding. She said then it was a wedding luncheon in those days, and then there was that the next night there would be a ball following you know, uh, the consummation of the marriage. Um, and she said it's so strange that they're like we have a big luncheon where I'm still supposed to be a virgin, and then the next night we're going to have a grand ball where they celebrate the fact that I'm no longer a virgin. She's like, these Catholics are whack. so, so after the luncheon, he, in order to let you know that he's the man, went out for a few hours, like gaming with some friends and drinking before coming to your bedchambers. And you had bolted the door. And he was pounding at the door. And you're like, no, no, you're a jackass. Come back when you're sober and come back when you have respect. And he's like, I will beat you. I will beat you. I will kill you. I will. Yeah, and you're like, yeah, this really makes me want to spread my legs for you. You're like, you are the worst. Go away. If you think this is how I'm starting my married life, and he said, well, if you think this is how I'm starting my married life, and he's like pounding at the door, screaming. So finally, he said, step back from the door for a moment. And I'm going to open it. You have to step back. So he stepped back, and you had like a chair under the doorknob, and you pulled it, and you unbolted, and you opened the door, and you looked in the doorway, and you're standing there in this beautiful sheer negligee. It was sheer for the time, like thin cotton. You said, but and you have a cutlass in one hand, a dagger in the other hand, and you have three snarling wolfhounds beside you, and said, is this what you want? And he said, no. And she said, do you want me to slice it off your body right now? Or do you want me to run you through? Or do you want to go sleep, come back to me in the morning? And when you come back, make sure you bring cocoa. And he's like, okay. There were a few more little words. So he came back the next morning with a bunch of servants behind him, and they had not just cocoa, but this whole like breakfast buffet that they set up this table in your room with this beautiful breakfast buffet. And he came in, he was clean, he was looking good, but wearing his nightshirt. And then he sent them all away, and he closed the door and he said, I will serve my bride. And he poured some cocoa for you and brought it to you. And you drank one sip and you handed it to him and say, that will refresh. Now put it down and come here. Because you said, the whole point of that ball tonight is that we got to do this. And from then on, the two of you had a very passionate marriage. Your fights could be heard, they'd say, miles away. And your making up could be heard miles away. It was like the Harlequin romance, but you met as equals. And he would say, teach me how you do the sword fighting. He's like, I didn't know you could do that. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to bring that up at a fancy ball during my coming out parties. And then he was really good with the whip. And he said, there's not a lot of whip work on a ship. Like there's some, but what you do is far and beyond what I'm aware of. So you started teaching each other things, which meant your fights with each other, you always knew had to be screaming matches far apart, or you would literally kill each other. So the two of you had like a marriage, like out of the romantic stratosphere. And you had 5 children together. She said 7 miscarriages. but some were early, but 5 children that came to fruition and lived. And, 7 miscarriages and like children who died as babies and the like. But you said it was so important to you that you always maintained your beauty. So after each child, you made sure you always got your figure back. Um, she said, realistically, there's certain levels of elasticity that goes and never comes back. But you never were going to give that man an opportunity to want to look elsewhere because you demanded that he never take a mistress. And he knew that if he took a mistress and you caught him, you would kill him or dismember him. And he was very fond of his member. So, um, and so you had a great marriage. You said there were 2 times when you took him to visit your father. Your pirate father. You and your family always corresponded, and there was a family that lived in a harbor town that you would write to the lady of the family, and she would write back. So everyone thought you were pen pals, but she was forwarding news as well as you were pen pals, but she always included letters from your family. Your husband was aware of this, and he knew better than to say, that's inappropriate because, he knew better. Uh, but when you had been married for a year, you decided to go on a honeymoon tour. You said it was just a miracle that you hadn't had any children yet, because certainly you guys had a lot of sex. Uh, so you went on on a what you called like an around the world. It was like basically ended up being like an 18-month tour. And in there, you actually introduced him, like found your dad's pirate ship, arranged to meet with your dad. You introduced him to your brothers, um, and your dad promised that any of the ships owned by his family or your birth family would never be pirate. That would always be under their protection. And they put word out to other pirates to not touch these ships, which didn't guarantee anything, but any pirates knew you didn't really want to go up against this family who now was getting more and more boats out there. The legacy, the legacy grows. Yeah, yeah. And they said that's not uncommon. The way your family ran things is not uncommon with pirates. Um, and then later, when you were older and you had your children, you and your husband took a vacation to the south of France, and your father and several of your brothers met you there. No, she's saying Portugal, to southwestern Portugal. And your father and several of your brothers met you there so that you were able to show them your children. And but you never pirated yourself again, or as Leticia slash Betty slash Bets, Pirate Bets is saying, you did pirate, but it was in more legitimate matters. Plus, she said, this may be kind of how like mafia kind of families started because they were able to launder things through you and you're able to launder things through them. She said, what woman would not help her brothers and father when she can? So there was definitely some interesting illegal shenanigans going on that really helped grow your husband's empire of, so that's interesting. But she said that's a story for another time. What she would like to do, because she's aware that she's used up a lot of time and there is one more life that will want to come through. She said when you like go to sleep at night and you're lying, in that as you're getting dozy, start imagining moments of her life. And then she will come through and join you, and then she'll start taking over so that you'll go, oh, that was a nice dream, but it felt so real. And also, she said she's been with you your whole life and she speaks with you often. So you can have conversations with her and you'll feel thoughts coming out of your head, projecting out. And when you hear things popping into the back of your brain, that's her.
Okay.
So don't go, oh, I answered myself. No, if it's in the front of your brain, that's still projecting out. But if it pops in the back of your brain, that's coming in. Okay. Or if you hear it in your ear, or just like a sense of knowingness. She said you'll get to know very quickly. And the more you trust that that's her, and she said at first she may need to commingle with you for you to accept it. So at first it will be like a mixture of you and her. But the more you just say, oh, that's her, the easier it will be for her to come and just start chatting with you until like you'll be there, doing some task or taking a walk, and she'll just come and start talking with you.
That's exciting.
Yeah, she's really fun. She likes you a lot.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
and she looks forward to helping you work up your feisty fire.
I do have fire. Carried on in this lifetime.
She said there's a reason why she agreed to come be in this life with you.
Okay.
That the two of you are compatible, and if you had been growing up with her as her sister, you would have had a lot of fun. You would have fit in